We're at the 2025 American Pistachio Growers Conference in Monterey, and I'm here with Justin Wylie of Wylie Farms, and he also sits on the sustainability committee for the American Pistachio Growers. Thanks for being here, Justin.
Sure.
We've been chatting a little bit about the things that the committee is doing. What would you say are some of the key sustainability topics that you guys are focusing on right now in the committee?
There's quite a few, so we're still in the process of defining that. The committee itself is pretty young, and there's a lot of different voices. I sit on the board as well, and so we're discussing it at the board level and where our focus should be. The main goal of the sustainability committee is a value add. So as a board member for years, we've been looking at what we can do as APG to continue to add more value for the assessment dollars that we're getting. And Joe Coelho today mentioned his focus on grant writing. I think that's a huge chunk. There are a lot of new technologies. There are new products coming down the pipeline. We're looking at that. I think that's a huge value add for us, for me as a grower in my own operation, that Joe is looking at everything that's coming down the pipeline, potentially doing trials. What we're doing is actually approaching these companies trial on some growers' ranches. So we're collecting that data specifically in pistachios in the Central Valley, on our own ranches, and then coming back to growers and sharing our results. And actually, even early on, there's been some really surprising results. For what I thought a new technology was really exciting. It came back either missing any sort of benefit or even just a very mild benefit. So we're already seeing that. We're sorting through the technologies ourselves and the new products and forming an opinion. But in general, it's a value add. And then we want to look at what we can do, and we call it sustainable because we're really looking at the sustainability of our farms. We've seen what has happened in other industries. We see a lot of pricing issues where farmers aren't breaking even. They're actually operating in the red. And thankfully for now, most pistachio operations are still making money, but there's going to be some more price pressure as the crop continues to increase. And we want to get ahead of that. We want to see that we're actually moving forward, that we're doing the best thing we can with our budget dollars, and
Right.
we're not continuing to just accept price increases across the board in labor and electricity and everything. And so what can we do to be more sustainable in that? We want our operations to be sustained and still be here in 10 years and not operating in the red. And so what can we do to cut costs, to save money, to maybe even increase the fertility of our soils so that in 5 to 10 years, we can see that we're actually making progress on that front and moving forward. And I think the exciting thing is that there's a lot of grant dollars out there, and we can, as an industry, take advantage of those grant dollars, have a conversation with USDA, CDFA, and point them in the right direction to say, hey, we don't just want compost and cover crops. We want access to some of these newer technologies that are going to make our operations more efficient and even increase profitability and production quality over time. And then, so it's a one big package, but it's really exciting for me.
And you're a grower yourself, so you're on this committee, but you have a big stake in this as well. And when you said you're doing some of these trials, we were talking earlier about delivering the message and what you're trying to get out to growers, and it's hard for them to see something that costs money. They also want to hear that it's going to be profitable. So what is that message you're trying to get out of how the sustainability efforts can also coincide with profitability for growers?
Yeah, and I think that's first and foremost. As a grower myself, I am farming some acreage organic. My family and I farm organic. We farm what we would consider to be regenerative blocks, but well over half of our operation, or even more, is still what you would call a normal
Right.
conventional operation. And part of the reason is for that is we are still developing a roadmap on what that looks like. But first and foremost, that production cannot drop off. Your quality cannot drop off. None of us can afford in our operations to see that. If we're gonna adopt some of these soil health principles and that whole side of the sustainability question and world, we need to be able to see that our operations are still as profitable or from a production standpoint, even better. And so if it's not improving the operation, if it's not improving the bottom line, it's not worth adopting.
Right.
And that's first and foremost. So if there is a threat from a pest, we need to treat that. And as I was just talking with Joel Siegel about, we find maybe instead of a broad spectrum where we're killing beneficials, we looked at something that's more selective. So sustainability can mean something as simple as that, is choosing a more selective spray and a chemical instead of something that's more broad spectrum. So there's a lot of definitions for it, but at the end of the day, the operation and the crop that's on the tree now comes first. And then secondary is what can we do for our soils, for the ecosystem as a whole, to maybe push that forward and see benefits as we go forward.
And I think sometimes it does come down to it takes some time to see these things actually become profitable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some of that is, you'll see that in cover crops. A lot of people have adopted cover crops first year or two. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
You think with the right rainfall, over time, you start to see this amazing change where your water infiltration rates improve. You get that kind of living mulch. So you can even see fertility increases. Yep. I think there's plenty of growers that have seen that where we were all skeptical. Is it worth it to spend the money, the $40, $50 an acre in seed and the planting, and then to have to deal with it operationally in the spring when we're dealing with maybe early plant bug pressure? But over time, if you've stuck with it and adopted it, you will see the benefits, and it actually ends up being a savings in your budget, improves the budget, not a cost for the feeling of doing something good.
Yeah.
It's more operationally, it's actually a benefit, dust control and all that.
And I know you've been dealing with that, or you've been doing that on your operation in Fresno County for quite a while now, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that.
Right.
So you can speak firsthand to,
Sure.
it took some time, but you were able to see some
Definitely.
results from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And then just to wrap it up, what advice would you give to growers if they were looking to implement more sustainable practices in their operations? And specifically, where can they seek out help from American pistachio growers?
I think there's going to be some really exciting things to come. Joe is working really hard. Joe and team and Zachary and everyone are working really hard to put together some packages for growers. We're going to be reaching out to growers. We are looking very closely at some upcoming grants. Like I said, even trying to shape those grants and offer them to growers. The idea would be to choose some new technologies, some new products that we think are really exciting, things that have already been through research and development, and they're already showing promise. We're seeing it on our own ranches, then to go out and provide funding for growers so they can go out and adopt some of these practices, try the technologies, see what kind of results they get with zero risk. So that's a big one. But I do think a lot of these principles, a lot of what we're talking about around focusing on nutrition and plant health, and then trying to reduce the preemptive sprays that a lot of us have been doing, and myself included, it's very easy to get into a rhythm where you're spraying and you're treating just because that's what you do at this time every year. But we're getting to a point where in a lot of other industries, they can't afford to do that. So they're pulling back on some of these inputs, and some of it has a detrimental effect, but sometimes they're finding that there is no change and that they were spending money on sprays that didn't necessarily benefit their operation, benefit the final result. So I think one that I really love is Mineral Nutrition and Plant Disease. It's an old book. It's actually a pretty expensive book. But there's some very old sort of traditional science around this where we've been looking at this for decades where, honing in and fine tuning certain minerals can actually have a direct effect on certain plant diseases. And so going back to some of this traditional research that's been done for decades and going back to that and looking at some of the minors that maybe we were ignoring, adding in an extra foliar, or even cutting back on things like nitrogen. If you're overapplying potassium or nitrogen, you might actually see a reduction in some of these disease pressures. I think the information's out there. The general feeling is that regenerative is this sort of sustainability, is this general thing where we're just going out and it's a new horizon. But in fact, there are people that have been farming this way for decades and have seen huge benefits in their operations. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of farmers that have been doing it in permanent crops as well. And I think if you're seeking that out, look around. There's information out there for them. There's books and podcasts for them.
What was the name of that book again?
Mineral Nutrition and Plant Disease.
Okay. And you said it's an older book, so it's what as old as new again?
It's been updated several times, and but there's some new versions out there. I think it's really interesting, and it's not a Bible. It's not something to base your operation on, but it's another perspective to say maybe there's something I'm doing in my operation that's actually exacerbating the issue, and I can alleviate that without a spray.
Yeah, just another tool in the toolbox for the grower. So.
Right.